In Web 2, if you don't know what the product is, like in social media or search engines, then you are the product. In Web 3, if you don't know where the yield is coming from, then you are the yield. What is going on, Metaverse? So you're involved in Web3 gaming, but you want to ensure that you end up getting projects that turn out like Google, Facebook, or World of Warcraft, instead of those that end up like Pets.com, MySpace, or Cyberpunk 2077. No one has time, money, or attention to spend on a project that's doomed to fail. But we know that statistically, many of these projects are not going to make it. So, what can you do to ensure that you end up focusing on projects that have a good chance of success? You need to learn the 5 key features that are true of all promising up-and-coming Web3 gaming projects. So, let's hear what Annie knows about the keys to great Web3 gaming projects. If you follow my channel, you know that I review dozens of potential Web3 gaming projects, and I have several investment funds, infrastructure projects, and other content creators that I follow to ensure that I'm doing detailed analysis on each one before I give you a recommendation for it. Now, in this video, I'm not going to share with you specific projects. Instead, what I'll share with you is my methodology for identifying the worthwhile projects to follow. As a keynote, these are not recommendations to buy or sell any tokens or NFTs. I'm not saying anything about the specific price or valuation of a given project. Instead, what you need to be focused on are which of these games and game infrastructure platforms are going to have the potential for long-term success. Those are the ones that you need to be following. So, with all that being said, what are the main qualities that I look for when I assess the viability of a Web3 gaming project? Number 1, and most important, is a talented and capable team. You need to ask yourself the following question when you're considering a project. Firstly, can this team build what they claim? As we know, the most important part of any project or company is the people. The technology, the market fit, the economics, and the product don't matter if you don't have a good team to deliver. This includes the vision and the leadership of the project founders and executive team. It also includes both the quality and, more importantly, the quantity of the development team and resources that are going to be necessary to bring the founder's vision to life. If you have the right people involved, even if the project doesn't pan out to be the next blockbuster or the greatest AAA Web3 gaming project ever, they'll be able to ensure that they can produce something worthwhile that will appeal to gamers and have a good product fit overall. How do you assess this? Well, I've got 2 key criteria. The first one is, do they have a demonstrated success delivering in both Web 2 gaming and in the Web 3 economic side of the business? Look at the experience of the executive team as a starting point. It's fine if you've got a stronger founder who comes from a Web 2 gaming background. You need someone with that knowledge on the team. It's also fine if your founders have Web 3 experience primarily. But what you need to make sure is they've surrounded themselves with a mix of experience across both fields. Because frankly, there are no good Web3 games out right now. And Web2 games have never had the challenge of integrating a real-world economy into their in-game platforms. So you need both aspects of this to be included within the project itself. The second criteria is, do they have the right development team size to be able to build their vision? Now, if you've got someone that's claiming they will build an MMORPG with a 10-person development team in the span of 2 years, you're probably going to be out of luck and left holding a bag. Now, I can't say what is the exact right team size because it always depends on the scope of the project. But what you should do is look to see, is this project under-resourced? The best way to determine that is to look at equivalent Web 2 gaming projects and how long they took to build. And then, on top of that, you need to add anywhere between an additional 10 and 30% development time or size of the development team to ensure the proper integration with the blockchain and whatever economic structures are being put in place. This ensures that you'll get a good product. Moving on to our second key feature that I look for in assessing Web3 gaming projects, it's sufficient capitalization and strong backers. You need to ask yourself the following question. Can this team survive technical and macro headwinds for up to 2 years to ensure that they can deliver their product? Rule number 1 of startup firms is don't run out of money. And rule number 2 is don't forget rule number 1. In this market, and in any markets, if you're investing, building, or following startup projects, you need to assure yourself that they're going to be able to last long enough to put out their products. Now, there are many ways that a company can go broke trying to get there and have to liquidate assets before they can launch their vision. The team needs to have sufficient runway to carry them through challenging times. Especially when we talk about Web3 integration, there are many risk points along the way, and technical challenges are certain to come up. Down markets, development delays, and market fit questions are just some of the many risk points. The good news for many founders that have launched in Web3 over the past couple of years is they were able to raise capital at very high valuations during the last bull run. So, as I shared in my video linked in the description below, with over 300 gaming projects funded in the past couple of years to a tune now of almost $8 billion, there's plenty of capital to go around. You need to ensure, though, that your team is sufficiently capitalized. It's less than ideal for early backers of these projects to have their valuations drop as they have in the bear markets, but honestly, if it's at the right long-term fit, you can be sure that an early bear market is not going to deter these projects from building. Leaning on the due diligence of others is no way to absolve yourself from responsibility, but it can be a good starting point for considering which projects to focus on. This is a situation where it's more of a red flag than anything else if you see a project that has no large reputable VCs, angel investors, or partners that you can identify. So with that in mind, if you're at an early enough stage, and let's say you're even leading the funding round, you probably don't need to worry about this advice. That said, shoot me a DM. I'm always interested in looking for investment partners or fellow researchers. The third key feature we need to focus on when identifying promising Web3 games is compelling gameplay loops. In this case, you need to ask yourself the following question. Would I play this game regularly, even if I couldn't earn money or didn't own the assets? This is the key point of attraction for Web2 gamers into the space. If your choice is between sitting and staring at the wall or playing this game, and you choose the game, that's a pretty low bar. But when you think about the choice that all of the potential gamers of a project are going to have to make, it's not a question of doing something terrible or playing the game. They have to be willing to choose to play this game over any other usage of their time. That includes spending time with family and friends, playing other video games, working, doing side hustles, other hobbies. Anything you can think of can compete with their time and attention. And for a game to be viable, it has to have the overall appeal to ensure that players are willing to engage. If the graphics, sound effects, gameplay loops, and content are worse than a game launched in the late 1990s, the answer is probably no, this isn't a project you need to be focusing on. And if the game mechanics are fun but overly simple, what you're probably going to find is players will download it, play for an hour or two, and then just delete the app or uninstall the game. Neither of these is a situation that's going to ensure sustainability in the game ecosystem. Now, depending on how far along the game is, in many cases, you may be identifying these projects before there's even an early version of the game out. That said, I highly advise looking at and reviewing alpha, beta footage, as well as actual gameplay clips. Don't get fooled by trailers, because it's very easy to put together something in Unreal or Unity where you can display a perfect quality picture, but there's no real content behind it. So ensure that the question, would I be willing to play this game just for the fun of it, is answered before you get too heavily involved in a project. Oftentimes we want to figure out what are the key elements that make a great game. And depending on the genre, there's a lot of right answers. There's certainly some wrong answers too, but if you consider gameplay, storyline, the environment and artwork, the lore, the challenge of the game itself, these are all good places to begin focusing. Additionally, gameplay is more commonly important than the lore or the environment. Also, PvP content provides a lot more replayability value than PvE. In general, if you're going to be playing against the environment, either the developers are going to have to put out more content, or they have to have an amazing AI in order to be able to challenge you. So with that said, mechanics that are easy to learn and hard to master are often going to lead to new players coming and, more importantly, staying within the ecosystem. Another piece of advice I have here is if you are unsure of the genre of game, let's say that you've never played a tower defense style game before, but you're interested in exploring one. My recommendation is to find a fan of the genre and show them the gameplay footage. If that gamer is willing to tell you this is good or bad, it's probably a good sign for the actual mechanics of the game if they're not already invested themselves in the project. So if they're interested without that dialogue about Web3 content and ownership and NFTs, it's a good sign that the gameplay loop itself is probably solid. The fourth key feature that Web3 games need to have is a solid marketing and community development plan. In this case, ask yourself the following question. How will players find out about the game and why will they try it out? Any project, whether it's a Web3 game or otherwise, needs to have a very solid addressable market and a unique value proposition. Why is this game going to attract gamers as compared to something else? And I don't mean just the gameplay loop, I also mean how are they going to put eyeballs onto the project? The best way to ensure potential customers is locking them in before the product's even available. And so you can signal interest in a project by developing and building a community on the front end before the game launches. This is one of the real beautiful parts of Web3 gaming. In many cases, the community exists before the product is actually developed. If we're not purchasing solely for price appreciation, the value of NFTs and the number of players that are eager to get their hands on it to be able to play the game can be a good early signal. Now, by that same token, this space is very crowded, and it's difficult to differentiate between games that are in early build phases. So having a clear hook or a unique selling value is really critical. So make sure that you hear and understand what is the go-to market strategy of the development and marketing team for the game. In many cases, the gaming project is going to have to adjust over time. Usually the first instance isn't the right one, and you'll have to adjust your marketing strategy, your community engagement approach. So make sure that the founders and the game developers are open to critical feedback, whether it's through Discord or Twitter. They have pretty regular communication with the overall community that's engaged in their game, and they're willing to listen to that feedback early. Because in a space as early as this, it's easy to make a lot of mistakes before you get a product to the door. Now, in that case, nothing's going to actually beat that product being good. But by the same token, you can have the greatest project in the world, and if no one actually plays it, it doesn't matter. I'd also like to share that if you find my content good, nothing beats eyeballs for a content creator. So if you'd give me a like or subscribe, I'd appreciate it. Anyways, back to our focus on the fifth feature of up-and-coming Web3 games that you need to be researching. This is clear and sustainable economic structures. In this case, you need to ask yourself the following question. Where is the revenue coming from that funds the team, investors, and gamers? If you're going to get involved in a Web3 gaming project, especially financially, you need to understand where the money is coming from and where it's going to. Web3 games are integrated into the real-world economy in a way that Web2 are not. That's a feature because asset ownership is a good thing for gamers. However, it's also possible that there's risk here because the details of how that's structured aren't always transparent in the first case. Play to earn, play to own, play and earn, all of these concepts are very different in how they're approached by gamers and investors. And it can be very challenging to evaluate what's the type of game that I'm buying into or that I'm purchasing an NFT in to be able to play. So what should you look for? In my video on what comes after play to earn, I share the following structure for Web3 gaming economies. I don't believe that any games that are purely play to earn will ever be 100% sustainable. Individual game modes such as tournaments, PvP competitions can be play to earn, but those have to be elements of a gaming ecosystem, not the entirety of the product. Otherwise, there's no one willing to put in additional money to fund those that are extracting value from the game. I would be very cautious about the play to earn moniker unless you have a very clear picture of where the money's flowing into the in-game economy. If there are tokens, what are they being used for? If it's only for governance purposes, it's probably a very good structure and there's minimal risk. If they're used for investment returns and it's essentially functioning like a stock certificate or DeFi protocol of some type, confirm the total market valuations, the token split allocations for the team and early seed investors, the vesting timeframes, locking and staking mechanics. If all of this doesn't make sense to you, you probably need to spend some more time getting familiar with Web3 finance concepts before you begin investing into Web3 games. That said, if all of those make sense, then make sure that you read through the project's white papers and get a handle on it. If you have questions, you should be very comfortable asking, again, in Discord or Telegram or Twitter, wherever the appropriate community is for those projects. If someone's not willing to be fully transparent or open, or they accuse you of causing fear, uncertainty, and doubt, you probably need to go to another project, because any reputable game is going to be more than happy to answer those questions for you. In Web 2, if you don't know what the product is, like in social media or search engines, then you are the product. In Web 3, if you don't know where the yield is coming from, then you are the yield. This is true for DeFi protocols as well as Web3 gaming projects. You need to make sure you understand the economics before you get burned. A few risk signals that you can keep in mind. These don't guarantee that the project is a scam or going to rug you, but they could be causes for concern from an overall sustainable economy. The first one, and most obvious, is infinitely printed tokens and NFTs. Anything that there's an infinite supply of is, by definition, worthless. There's nothing wrong with valueless items. In fact, many projects are going to have items that are not intended to have full value. But don't base any kind of earnings or ownership value, implied or otherwise, based on something that can be easily devalued or created by someone else within the game. Another key flag is if there's value being extracted by players for no demonstrable skill. People aren't willing to pay you for something that provides no value to them. So if you're doing something that can be easily farmed out to a bot or someone that has no experience at the game, there's no value that you're creating long term into that economy. And so if you're expecting to get paid for that, it's probably a short-term approach. Winning tournaments, esports, these are some great examples of people adding value to a game ecosystem. And so if you're getting paid for some amount of demonstrated skill, then that's probably a sustainable approach. You'll have to look into the details, but I would look more towards those as play-to-earn type of mechanics. Another red flag is very complex or obscure token structures. If more than 2 tokens exist for a project and they're interconnected in some meaningful way, it probably means someone is trying to hide something. And if you don't know what that is, you're at risk. There's a reason that the game is not called 2-card Monte. If there's a third variable, it can be much more complex to track everything. And lastly, high-cost items can be a red flag for a project. If you're having to purchase something that's valued at several $1,000s on the front end, you better be really cautious about where that return is coming from if you're hoping to earn, or that asset's going to hold value when the game actually launches. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with spending money on a project, but if you're assuming that because you spent a lot of money, that asset is going to be valuable to someone else, you probably need to rethink that approach. There are so many projects launching, it's really impossible to know where to spend your time. And so making sure that you have good partners in Web3 gaming is more critical than ever. Platforms like Arcade and Polymos, which I'll link in the description below, are good examples where you can learn about Web3 gaming projects before you spend time or money investing in them. Additionally, following good angel investors, VC firms, and content creators that are reputable, not just shilling their own bags, can give you good direction. Some good examples like Framework, ETH Lizards, Santiago, or yours truly that are always going to disclose specific projects that they have an investment in are good places to start. I'll share social media channels for all those that I mentioned in the description below. In the first 2 videos in this series, I've now shared why you should focus on GameFi as the next segment of crypto, and what you should be looking for in upcoming GameFi or Web3 gaming projects. In my next video, I'm going to share with you what are some of the highest quality projects that I'm personally following in the Web3 gaming space. As always, do your own research. Good luck out there, stay safe, and I'll see you in the metaverse. And now you know what Annie knows about the keys to great Web3 GameFi projects.